Welcome to the Jackie Scully Show. This is not your ordinary podcast. This is a space for heart-centered conversations, bold ideas, and transformative visions. I sit down with thought leaders and visionaries who are making waves in the world of heart, education, and consciousness. Together, we explore how we want to live, co-create, and thrive in 2025 and beyond. Every Friday, join me for inspirational and thought-provoking stories of everyday people creating extraordinary impact. These individuals are sparking waves of positive change, embodying the kind of impact we all aspire to create. This season, 3 powerful themes emerge: the heart of wholeness, exploring inner love, emotional balance, and our deep connection with awe; the future of education, rethinking learning through personalized pathways, collaborative growth, and community-driven transformation; and a new era of consciousness, expanding possibilities and how we live and thrive together. Come sit with me. Let's dream, build, and embody the world we wish to see. This is the Jackie Scully Show. Enjoy. Hello, welcome to the Jackie Scully Show. And today I have a wonderful guest, a good friend, Stella Yann, with us. She's an authenticity alchemist, connecting people to their soul purpose, brand storyteller for positive change makers, lightworker on a mission to awaken new earth leaders worldwide, founder of the Stellar Storytelling, creative director of Unlock, creator host of 2 podcasts, Big Souls, Big Ideas, and Born to Do It, and an author of her new book, No One Knows Me. Stella brings a unique perspective to this episode, our departure from conventional narratives from my last and our current podcast. As a lightworker, she's not just a divine messenger, but a beacon of authenticity. She's a special soul near and dear to my heart, and I'm blessed to know her, call her a friend, and continue to have amazing collaborations between my podcast, her podcast, and growing body of work. Welcome to the Jackie Scully Show, Stella. I'm so happy to have you here.
Hi, Jackie, and thank you for having me on your podcast. It's an honor to be able to connect with you at such a deep emotional level where we get to heal some wounds and open up conversations to heal the inner children of other adults on earth who are ready for the ascension. And it's fantastic that we get to explore some new earth ideas and speak about what it means to walk on the lightworker's path, because I know that it's still something that people are getting familiar with. So thank you for creating that space for us.
Thank you. And this is actually probably my first time I've been this comfortable to be so open. And that's why I started this podcast, to be like, let's do it. Let's just talk about it. Let's just put all of the cards out on the table and go really truthful. And I think that's what I admire about you, especially with your videos on TikTok. You just really bring the full truth of what you channel, the messages you get, what you want to share with the collective. Because I think you're at a point where many of us as light workers is like, there's no reason to hold back anymore. We don't need a tiptoe around it. And we're in this really ripe energy of this time of just coming into the age of Aquarius and being in this kind of energy of how do we want to create the new earth? We connected too because there's this love of children and education and talking about the inner child and really wanting to build a new community to foster these beautiful beings that are coming into the world, and they're sensitive souls and they're very intuitive. And we can see that. And I think we have a lot of alignment. And I know that we're going to continue to be on each other's podcasts and doing lots of collaboration. So it's such an honor to have you here. And with that, just anything just to get our guests acclimated to learning a little bit about you, what you've been working on, maybe a little bit about your story. And then we'll just go big picture, talking about, our whole connected consciousness and what we see not only in education, but just in the grander collective.
Absolutely. Thank you for honoring my work on TikTok. It really is work on some days because you have to think about the flow of consistency. It's not, some of the messages are channeled, some of the messages have been bubbling up for a while before I actually had the time, the energy, or the courage to record them. And I think the age of Aquarius is reminding us to honor and treasure the information that we're receiving, because now is the time for us to analyze it, to integrate it, or to share it with the world. And some of the ideas that I've been gifted with, they're out of this world and they're from the future, seemingly, because they don't resonate with many people on Earth because they're not at the same wavelength. My ideas often are coming from a very awakened presence, from a higher state of consciousness. And I love when I come across other people that are at the same level, but they're exploring different aspects of what I'm trying to say. So that I know that I have much to learn as well, that I can be a teacher and a student of life, which is something that we've covered on our episodes. The School of Life, we're all students, but we can all be teachers as well. One of the main questions I run into when I speak to people about their authentic story and about how they can be of service is, but where do I even begin? Most people don't know how to share this information, because this information sometimes it's our own thoughts, and we've learned how to downplay ourselves. And what I'm trying to help people do is learn to honor their inner world. That self expression is kind of the pathway for sharing that authenticity, because your ideas are the seeds and your ideas need to be planted. There are certain ideas that you need to develop in silence. There are certain ideas that you need to share with the world, because somebody needs to hear them for them to awaken, for them to understand something about themselves. And my path has been creativity since high school. It started as a writing path. I went on a competition. My teacher at school, she said, maybe you should try and write for this competition. I was like, okay, never done it before. Let's try it. And I won first place, which was a competition named The Magic of Words. And I thought, there's something there. I think the universe is trying to tell me something. And so this was the moment I decided I'm gonna have a career in journalism, creative writing, and I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna share what needs to be shared through me. Then kind of life took me away from that a little bit, and sooner or later I found my way back to writing. It's just that it wasn't so much the writing that the divine sent me to channel. It was more to do the writing that society needed within the existing market. So, being a communication assistant at a company or a marketing researcher, these titles that are currently existing on the market. But what we are each called to do on earth is not dependent on the market. It's dependent on our soul and what's already in that soul, that authentic blueprint. And it took me about 10 years from high school and university for me to return to my own soul and what my soul wanted me to do. And so the creative path blended with spiritual path around 2020 when the big pandemic happened. And ever since then, my whole life has been leading from within. So trusting that inner guidance, trusting the higher self. And if I didn't trust it, I wouldn't have started the company. I wouldn't have started Stellar Storytelling and be on a mission to help people to believe that their story matters, because it's through their authentic story that they get to express and actualize that blueprint. I wouldn't have started two podcasts. We wouldn't have collaborated on multiple episodes, multiple conversations. And so I now help people learn more about their purpose through a model that I've developed with the guidance that I received from within, which blends astrology and numerology. And this guidance, I didn't study for it. This is what blows my mind the most, is that if we didn't suppress the access of children to their own consciousness, to their own soul, they wouldn't have to get lost. They wouldn't have to lose so much of their potential, so much of their power, so much of their joy in these endless cycles of trauma, because they would know from the very beginning of their life why they're here, because we all do. It's the programming, it's the conditioning that prevents us from being one with our higher self. And what my higher self guided me back to, or the divine guided me back to my higher self, however you want to view it, is knowledge that I seemingly unlocked overnight, and I get to use it now to help people. And this is the power of your spiritual awakening and trusting that inner guidance. And I'm sure that you know about that power because you've experienced it firsthand.
Yes. And I have new aha moments. We've had so many conversations on podcasts and just like connecting virtually that even when you're sharing this part of your story, I still had new aha moments come to mind. And I love that there's so many layers to like how you're getting to know an individual. But with having very different lives, you know, you more in like, again, the journalism marketing kind of area of career, me in education. And now here we are at kind of like this
Mhm.
intersection of both. Uh, what you said really resonated with like creativity leading you to the spiritual and like connecting to the spiritual, because that's exactly what happened to me in 2022. So it was a couple years after. Whenever people share their pandemic story of like being in lockdown and then in 2020 they had this like spiritual awakening or aha moments of how they had to change their life, I'm like, yeah, that didn't happen for me. I was still really stuck in like just like in the thick of like the madness of it all, you
Mhm.
know, and I got lost in the noise of the pandemic and the politics and everything for 2 years. Like it actually, I always said I'm a slow mover. So, but it was the same thing. I found my creative side, which I didn't really think I had. I saw creative people all in my life. And because I tapped into that, starting a podcast and then writing a book as well. So again, we have very similar paths with that. It then awakened this deeper sense of like purpose and why you're here. And then things start clicking very quickly and you get downloads and information very quickly. And I feel like you are just like a direct connection to divine because the way you channel and bring these messages in, it's just like you opened up the floodgates and you can completely surrender to it. So you can have the spiritual awakening, you can be in that place, but if you don't completely surrender to it, and it depends on the person, it depends on your lifestyle and what's going on, um you might not have that direct access, but you have done that. So kind of getting in a little bit more of, as much as you feel comfortable, like what does that look like, feel like, that those messages that you're getting and like the information, and then how you feel this is now my service to, especially the book that you wrote and the book that you have coming out in a little bit, a second book in in a year is amazing. Um, just a little bit, maybe more of like the specifics, just to give our audience like, what does that look like or feel like to be that connected and get those messages? Because I do believe everyone can. Um, I think there's still difference between individuals and how they channel, maybe their clairs that they have. Like for me, I'm more of like clairsentience and I feel a real deep emotion, especially when like the collective is going through something. Like I can personally be feeling that within like my energy. Um, and then I try to like alchemize and move that energy. But yeah, just a little bit maybe more details about what that looks like for you.
Absolutely. I'll take a step back before the awakening, back to the pandemic, because I'm just being brought back to the living room when it was announced the pandemic is starting. We're gonna work from home, and we had a period where the company that I was working for, they put some people on pause, which was kind of like a government scheme, and I wasn't one of those. I was still employed full time, which gave me kind of the anchor every single day to show up and do this work. But I remember I got a promotion maybe a few months before the pandemic. And this was one of the saddest moments of my life because I realized I didn't have anyone to call to share my good news with, which was kind of the point of depression just before the pandemic. And I knew my life had hit some sort of rock bottom, but not necessarily a loud one, more like a quiet one where you feel like, where I felt like I had lost aspects of me continuously without recognizing all the signs, all the red flags. And when the pandemic started, it actually gave me the space to return back to myself. And it was that commitment, that surrender. because I knew I needed help. I just didn't have anyone that I could turn to around me for help. They wouldn't understand, because if I said to them I feel lost, they would probably say go through therapy, or buy this book or do the workshops, things that would give me surface level help, but not the deep help that I needed at the deeper levels. So that surrender happened during the pandemic, when I turned to the universe and I said, guide me. Obviously, I've lost my way, because at that point it was so quiet in my own mind, I wouldn't even receive ideas. And I remember in my childhood, high school, university, I had ideas. I'm a manifester. The ideas come through me. Everything was gone. And it didn't disappear overnight. Over time, it disappeared. And so I knew that the help that I needed wasn't on earth, and I asked for that help. I turned to the universe, to God, to the divine, to my higher self, and I said, guide me. And at first, recognizing the voice of my intuition wasn't as easy. It was more to do, or should I buy this? Should I do this? But over time, I trusted the prompts, and now I don't question them. If I think to myself, I should invite that person to have an interview with them, I should buy this book and read it, I do it because I know there is something in there. And this is one of the ways that you're communicating with your own higher self, with other people at a different level. Sometimes I'm hearing people through telepathy, using the clear sentience, clear cognizance. I can see things, I can hear things. And if I'm really being stubborn and I don't want to see those things or hear those things, the messages come to me in my dreams. So there is no way I can avoid the voice of my higher self or the divine anymore. And it was around 2023, 2022, 2023, I was really spending more time in spiritual awareness, spiritual practices, some tarot, oracle, reading about alchemy, reading about runes, reading about ancient practices that our ancestors did to be connected, to be of service, that seemed to be removed from our society for some reason. And I started questioning, why aren't we using those tools? Why aren't we talking about that? And I started to see how ugly the world is, how corrupted the world is in certain industries, like the entertainment industry and the education industry. They're making a mockery out of children. And this was really the point where I thought this childhood trauma theme is huge. We're awakening to talk about that, to heal that, to create resources to help people that are finally ready to face those wounds. And these are going to be adults. And adults that have not felt their emotions, they're going to have big reactions because they're finally going to understand the injustice that has been done to them at an emotional, mental, spiritual, and sometimes physical level. So No One Knows Me, my debut book, was about that. And it's interesting that that book wasn't even what I envisioned as my first book. The first book that I've been writing for 10 years is a book about happiness. But my higher self or my inner child needed me to write a book about pain first. And understanding that the pain that you've gone through is not for nothing. You've gone through that because one, you could survive it. Two, you needed to learn something from it. Three, you're here to break a cycle that's connected to the trauma that you've experienced. And so when that awakening fully happened, it was like a complete burnout. It was complete breakdown because all the senses, all the clear sentience, all of it got activated in a week. And all of the messages that I needed to start receiving, they all started to arrive really fast. And one of the things that really broke me was having a bit of a prophetic dream that kind of revealed to me that what I had experienced as the depression point a few years ago, where I thought I don't have anyone to call to share my good news, it was confirmed in that dream. The people that I called friends, they weren't friends. The people that I called family, they couldn't be trusted with the things that my soul needed to trust me with. So I was on my own. And that, to receive that in your dream and to wake up and pretend that it didn't happen, you can't do that. And so emotionally, I just broke down. This was the point. I quit my job and I thought, okay, I asked for it. I asked to be guided. This is the universe guiding me. So I'm going to follow the steps. And I began following the steps. I began receiving a lot of ideas, some of which I received in 2023, and I'm still to develop them because the time is not, it's not the right time just yet. But this is the point. This is the process of channeling, I suppose, for anyone that's listening and they're wondering, is this going to happen to me? Maybe, if you're ready to be of service, if your soul has volunteered to come here and service in that way. Maybe you're going to receive channeled messages that you are tasked with recording for social media, or messages that you can use presentations with your team, or messages that you can apply into your business because you're tasked with being the leader, the entrepreneur that shapes that new earth business. Maybe you're going to be tasked with blending astrology with psychology. Carl Jung, he did it before, you know, it's done. Our ancestors have done it before, working with archetypes, working with tarot, working with oracle cards, working with symbolism. There is nothing scary about it. I think what's scary is to live a life that was never meant to be the life that you came here to live a life as the shadow self, because you're not allowing yourself to embody all of you. You're quite literally a shadow of who you're supposed to be or who you're capable of being. And I think this is why I was facing that depression a few years ago. I was the shadow. I wasn't Stella in my full glory, in my full vivacity and joy. And even when I was masking it to keep being that version for other people because I want to be that version for other people. I want to be that source of joy everywhere I go because I know that my joy heals the world. My words heal the world. And I have to power through the dark seasons to continue to be that version because that is why I'm here. And I think most people are here to be that version, the version that embodies the joy and the love, and the version that brings that healing energy frequency on earth, because that's how we restore unity. That's how we have each other's back. And I think this is one of the heartbreaking moments that anyone that's going on their spiritual awakening is going to experience. You're going to see the people that you've been calling friends and family as wounded inner children. They may appear like adults, but they're just the wounded inner child that's acting out. It doesn't make their behavior less painful or triggering. It's just that you have to give them a little bit of grace as you distance yourself, because on some level they don't know what they're doing. They're unconscious. They're the shadows.
Mm.
They're acting as the shadow self. And if you are ready to be the light worker, you're going to trigger those shadows because it's time for them to embody more of their full expression.
Yes. And I love this idea of talking about how for so long we've been living in our shadow self, and we're not meant to just shun our shadow. And I've talked about that before, but we have to integrate it. And that's the whole, like you talk about alchemy. You have to bring it in, what you've gone through, into like what your pure essence is that light. And when you start to do the inner work, when you start to become awakened, you do see that in other people. You become hyper aware of other people's shadows. And then with real deep work, you know, like the first level is probably like, oh man, there's a lot of people in my life. Like, how did I spend all this time? Especially you'll have maybe lots of, maybe not family if you can't, but and you probably don't want to, but depends on the family member, but friends that will go away, right? Like they're just not on your wavelength anymore. And like, that's done. But I think the deeper level after that, like, cause there's always layers of healing, right? We're always healing. We're always coming more into our authenticity, is then like what you're saying is having grace and compassion, not meaning you're giving in and giving all of yourself to those people in the shadows and they're not working on themselves. You have boundaries, but you from afar can have grace and love and compassion. And then that leads to like a deeper sense of forgiveness. I mean, that gets to a really high level of, I think, even like being more connected to our light, that we can see that in other people and still have that grace and care because they're going through something that they don't even maybe realize they're going through, but you do. And sometimes it's also not our job to tell them, right? It's not our job because we just might be triggering people just by doing our healing work, right? Because like when we heal and we start to talk differently, produce differently in the world, what we create, people start to question like, that's not the same Stella that I knew. That's not the same Jackie that I knew. That can be triggering. And so it could potentially trigger people enough that maybe they start to question their own selves and want to heal. Or maybe not, it's that came to me. But I had this quote up on my board when you were talking about, I think, especially when you said I had a book that I wrote about happiness that I was writing for 10 years. And then this had to be the book, and pain had to be kind of the central point. And I think that's kind of reminded me a lot of my first book that I wrote, to The Guided Teacher, because I think I had to write it for myself, but also to show others that you can overcome. Because I think we need to have those overcoming stories. And so this quote that I had from like years ago, this woman that I met on LinkedIn, she wrote, or she said in, I think it was like in a talk or on a podcast, the world needs your other side experience. The world is going to be better by the stories of victory, the stories of possibility, the stories of your process that you will tell on the other side of your very dark day right now. We look forward to hearing you as the success. And I think we have to walk through it. And it's these people who we connect to as light workers, but there's a sense of being really brave and courageous to like, I will walk through this, then tell my story and share it so candidly on many modalities like podcasts and videos on TikTok and books, which can be very hard to do at first. And then now it just feels like a flow of sharing this. So then others can come and say, wow, like, thank you for sharing that, because I'm going through that right now. And now I feel like someone's kind of like holding my hand along the way. And that's what I always kind of get back to, not to get biblical, but this idea of like the story of Jesus. And I talk about the story of Jesus as a man before like the whole, whatever your religion is in Christianity or anything else. But the story of going through something really deep and then coming back to the masses to share, right? And I had this deep connection to that kind of the walking the way back in like August into fall, this past August into fall, because I was kind of going through my own sense of being lost and connecting kind of to that, even like story of Jesus of like, you get lost in the darkness or in this deeper spiritual connection to the divine. And it could be very emotional and very unnerving. And you don't know what's happening to you. You're like, almost feel like you're in a blender and you're just being like shaken up. Then clarity comes and there's a sense of, I need to share this with people. And I got to find the way that is authentic to me so that people will say, oh, okay, I can digest this a little bit. So I do that a lot through education. Like, and I think even my first podcast, The Teacher Story, I didn't consider that spiritual at the time, but what I was doing was holding space for those real intimate stories. And that's the way that I could reach people. And then my book was very much like that too. And then your work too. And I was really attracted to you in the beginning because I love astrology and numerology. And so there's people who connect to that are like, oh, I can gravitate towards Stella because I'm into those types of modalities and messages. And then when you get the book out there, and then like you're going to have another book that goes even deeper. When you get people that see you and you're so brave to share your story and share that authenticity, and then they're in that orbit with you, and then you go a little deeper. It's like, this is the work of being healers, right? This is the work of being light workers. And this is a service in all of these ways that we're doing it. And sometimes we don't know that we're even doing it, but it happens all the time. I know you probably get tons of people who write to you. I'm one of them. And I've had that happen where they're like, I read this, or I heard this on a podcast, and it just clicked something in me. And you're like, this is why we're doing what we're doing. And I just think it's really powerful. And it seems so simple sitting on a podcast, just like sharing what we're doing, but it can be part of that bigger service. And I want to get back into this bigger message of what you see in children and how we have connected with like what we want to see the new generation and like on new earth, like what school can look like, what community could look like, how do we tap into their talents? Because We don't want to have these generations go through decades of masking, of doing all of this, like hiding in the shadows. So then when they're in their 30s, 40s, 50s, they're doing what we're doing now, which is like this continual healing, instead of like being 7 years old, being 14 years old, being in young adulthood, and just knowing their essence and knowing what they're here to do. So anything you want to kind of dive in with that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm going to start with a visual, which is I'm picturing us in a vacuum. Like all of Earth is this playground, and we're in a vacuum. And every child that's awakened, if we all view ourselves as children, essentially, and we're kind of taking distance away from the center, and we're just expanding this vacuum. But the vacuum is meant to be contained, otherwise it explodes. And so we're near that point of rupture, that explosion, but it's liberating us, it's freeing us, it's not destroying us, it's opening up um the kind of like the flow of light to enter this playground, because this playground has been sealed, and it has been sealed, and there's just darkness and shadows and illusions. There's a lack of vision, clarity, and the energy is just very stiff and outdated and old. It needs to be, we need to let the open purify this space. And when you brought Jesus into the conversation, to continue the biblical theme just a little bit longer, he was rejected by his own people. He was not believed by his own people. And this is usually the story of people that awaken. You are rejected by the people closest to you continuously. And even when you meet new people, they reject you in the same way. Because if you weren't rejected by your peers, you wouldn't have turned to your ancestors. And those that are repeating the cycles, they're attached to their peers so much that they don't see a problem with it, because they get accepted. So if you are rejected by your peers, it's because you're meant to connect with your ancestors and be the cycle breaker, the change maker, the generational cycle breaker, or kind of like the light worker that leads a way to a new earth. And there's a reason we keep going back to these biblical stories, because they're trying to show us there's a reason you're going through the depression, the dissociation, the rejection, the neglect. You're not meant to find that peace with your peers. You're not meant to find the answers with your peers. The answers are somewhere above, somewhere beyond, rather. We don't know whether it's above or below. But the way that I view education, the way that I view the future of childhood, is more connectedness and more space for parents to allow children to develop their own selves from childhood, versus the parents seeing children as an extension of them, or the parents telling children who they need to be in order for them to stay safe in the world. I see parents protecting the authenticity of children so that these children can then become adults who become change makers with acceptance from their parents, so they don't experience the same rejection, so that both parents and children are connected to their higher selves, to ancestors, and there isn't anything missing in the link. So you're now connected with yourself, with your higher self, you're connected to your parents, you're connected to your peers. What a world that would be. And if we can get connected to our politicians, the people that are tasked with running the world, wow.
Yeah. Can you imagine
Total
light
unity.
workers in government? It'd be a totally different world.
I mean, they don't have to be in government, so long as there is an open communication with them. I think
Mm,
governments are there to be the buildings where important work happens, documenting the work happens. Light workers are always meant to be the beacon of light that travels around. They're kind of the answered prayers. You need help with something, a light worker comes. So
mm,
light workers are always meant to be fluid. There's a reason the governmental bodies are kind of buildings, or the education is buildings, but
mm,
maybe we can add some gardens. Maybe we can add some nature to that. Maybe
mm,
we can create some space where we can cultivate the practices where governments and education speak to the ancestors for guidance, not just the peers, not just the people that are on earth, but bridging
mm.
past, present, and future, because it's all interconnected.
Yeah.
And what I really want to do with my podcast, Born to Do It, the first podcast that I created, and I had the pleasure to have you on, it's use the model that looks into your natal birth chart to give parents clarity on their life path, on their soul purpose, and them help their children
Mm.
embody their authenticity with more ease, whether this model is applied at the level of parenthood or at the level of education. Because once again, imagine you start school, you have some sort of personality test that tracks your answers from the very beginning. It gives you some clues, it gives you some guidance. And then every year you collect that data and you see how you're progressing based on that feedback, based on that guidance. And before you leave school, you do the test again, or you review it and you see how much you've progressed based on your authentic educational growth
Mm-hmm.
plan. It's
Mm.
not revolutionary, that's the thing. It's the most
Yeah.
natural answer. I don't know why it's not happening.
I love the idea of a growth plan, and like part of education, instead of just being academics of like what you know, right,
Mhm.
is more about how you know yourself. Like if we truly think of Earth as a school, and really part of most of how these kids spend their day is in a building in school or whatever that looks like, to get to know yourself. So it should be about the growth plan, and the assessments would be more about these like inventories where it's personality, it's EQ, it's maybe also natal chart, using astrology, right? Using all of these modalities and starting to bring what we would used to just put in the spiritual world as like taboo to science, but melding it all together. Like it all works together. There's so much spirituality in psychology, like vice versa. Like it just goes hand in hand. And I'm hearing more and more on different podcasts and following different people, um, like Dr. Joe Dispenza, like the bridge of science and spirituality. And I think there is a little bit of more normalcy becoming without those conversations. And I think as that becomes more of a normal part of the scientific world, the brain side of the world, we will start to bring that into places like the government and classrooms. And then we really can start to nurture, because the whole goal of being here is to nurture ourselves and nurture each other, right? Like that is what we are meant to do, is like we're growing together because we're all connected. We're all coming from the same source. We have so many things that is part of our collective experience. And I think we need to tap into that more. Like appreciate the individuality and your individual gifts, but see that collective consciousness, that collective energy, and how we're bringing all of that together. So I think we're at the very beginning stage of it, which is really exciting because we're both like not that old. I mean, you're younger than me, but we got a whole life ahead of us. And we're at the beginning of all of this kind of like just about to start this new Earth experience. So I am so excited to be having this conversation with you today. And there will be more. I will have to have you back on because I think I want to get even like deeper into, again, our visions of like new Earth and all of that. But can you let our listeners know where they can find you? And I'll put all that information in the show notes, and any other final messages before we end here.
Yeah, so you can find me on TikTok and Instagram as New Earth Stella, very on theme, on brand. Stellar Storytelling dot club is kind of the domain I use for the creative work that I do and for the branding work to support New Earth leaders, entrepreneurs, and light workers that are ready to share their authentic stories. And one promise that I like to make on this podcast is I received this vision 2 years ago about the New Earth Order, or Neo. This is the year I want to turn this into a whole platform. And so hopefully when you're listening this, or by the end of 2025, the New Earth Order, or Neo, is going to have its own domain. It's going to have its own channel where we can host conversations around the New Earth specifically, because I know that many people will start to receive their own breakthroughs, their own ideas, their own way of being of service. And so this is an open invitation for people that are ready to tune in their higher self to come and join us there. You too, Jackie. I'm
Yes.
sure we're going to have some really powerful educational conversations there.
Oh, yeah. I'm just getting started. We're just getting started. So thank you so much. What a powerful conversation. I'm energized, like I always am talking with you. Thank you so much, Stella.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you for having me.